morning. I am Maureen, your moderator and a Montgomery County Master Gardener 2022 intern. The gardening experts joining us today on this program of In the Garden are Steve Dubick, Montgomery County Master Gardeners Coordinator for the University of Maryland Extension, and Mary Barnhart, a Montgomery County Master Gardener and lead for the Master Gardener virtual clinics, both the online clinic in the garden and the local clinic that's on site. Reminder for all of the viewers that some of the services the Montgomery County Master Gardeners provide to the community include our speakers group, demonstration gardens, youth gardening programs, therapeutic horticulture, special events, and we're going to talk about one today, and Ask a Master Gardener, located throughout the state of Maryland, just to name a few. But before we begin today's program, we would like you to know that you're welcome to submit questions during this live broadcast, and we will save time at the end of today's program to answer those questions. To do that during the live program, simply go to our Facebook link and submit your questions using the comment section. Otherwise, please consider sending your questions for future programs by email to inthegardenwithmcmg@gmail.com or call 301-590-2842 and leave a voicemail, including email address. This information will be repeated again at the end of the program. With that, I'd like to begin, and today's program will include a discussion of a very exciting upcoming event called Grow It, Eat It, sponsored by the University of Maryland Extension and the Master Gardeners Program across the state of Maryland. This is one of the events and it takes place on May 14th. Mary Barnhart and Steve are both going to comment on it, and they'll share important details about the program. We sincerely hope that you will be able to join us in participating in this exciting annual program, very hands-on, and it was launched in 2009 in response to the surge of interest in growing your own food and the concurrent economic recession. So with that, I'd like to ask Mary if she wouldn't like to tell us a little bit about the program.
Okay, the 2022 Grow It, Eat It event is this Saturday, as Maureen said, on May 14th. The rain date is May 15th at the same time. And during the event, you can tour our demonstration garden, which we talked about last week. And as it begins the growing season, and take classes to get yourself up and growing. You can walk through the demonstration garden and learn from the master gardeners about all kinds of things gardening. We have demonstration activities and plenty of master gardeners available to answer your questions. So we have some of the demonstrations include vertical gardening, keyhole gardening, raised beds, vegetable gardening, fruit, conservation garden, shade gardening. But there's a butterfly garden and a children's garden. And you also can talk to master gardeners about herbs, bees, baywise, and harvest sharing. We also will have a plant clinic that'll be running at this concurrent with the event.
Mary, I know we're too late to submit soil samples, correct? We have to wait till next year. Apparently, The soil samples need to be in by March, but for those of you watching, mark your calendars now, and you can submit your soil samples next year. Come to the event, and they will be discussed with you. Mary, I know we missed that deadline, but tell me, what is your favorite event at this, that occurs within this big event?
Oh, I like the demonstrations at some of the classes where they get down into the techniques used, like they'll have one on sweet potato growing. They have one on herbs, and I like to be able to. They have different gardeners use different techniques, and they'll demonstrate those techniques in the garden. And there are different ways of being creative with plants.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's truly a grow it and eat it. People will be able to sample some of the very things that are growing in the garden. That's fantastic. So where can we find this information if we want to follow up today and get involved or put it on our calendars?
It will be on the Montgomery County Master Gardener. I think it's on the Facebook page, and you should be able to get to it to our UMD link. And I think Bev puts that up on the
screen at the end of the program today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. Steve, is there anything that you would like to tell us? I understand this has been around for a while. It made it through the pandemic.
Yeah.
And everybody's excited to be in person this year. What's your favorite thing about this?
Well, it's just like you said, it's going to be in person, and pretty much almost all the events are going to be outdoors. There'll still be some access to, bathrooms, and we'll have some facilities outside. But because of COVID, most of the events are outside. There's cover for them. There's tents. There's also a program or programs that are scheduled throughout the day for youth, particularly for scouts. So sometimes scouts need to have a training in certain areas to earn a badge or some type of certificate. They'll be throughout the program, throughout the day as well. You can check out our website, as Mary mentioned at the end, to get you more details about that. And it's very popular for that. So kind of provides something for the whole family. There's something for the parents or the spouses or whoever's there, the relatives there, and then there are things for the youth to do too, with these programs that are specifically designed for youth, and with an educational component that is allowing them to earn a badge or certificate.
Cool. Sounds really exciting. Okay. So again, we'll be reminding folks at the end of this program where they can find more information. And again, contact us. Put a message in the Facebook comment section if you have any questions. We will be answering questions at the end of today's program. So with that, do we have any other announcements that we'd like to put up front before we start the program? I know we'll mention them again at the end. I don't know, Steve, if we want to talk about the plant sale that's happening, the greenhouse, or not.
Well, I can mention that real quickly. Montgomery College, Germantown campus, the environmental horticulture program is going to have a plant sale throughout the summer. We're going to try to have our first one, kick it off this coming Thursday. And it's right before our last class, but we'll probably have one probably the first and third Thursdays throughout the summer. So May, June, July, August, and probably even carry over a little September. A lot of the plant materials that we have are things that the students have grown or will be growing, because we're going to continually work in the greenhouse throughout the summer. We have tomato plants and pepper plants, and we'll have a lot of small native woody plants, ornamental grasses. We'll have some ornamental grasses. We'll have some coreopsis.
There's some water,
delphinium, and others.
Venus flytraps, I understand as well.
Yes, we have some Venus flytraps, and we have some small little sundews. So we have some carnivorous plants, and we have some plants that are really geared more towards for native plant conservation landscaping, like rush, switchgrass. I had some little blue stem. I think I've sold that, and other plants. So it's a variety of things that we've accrued over this past year, and we're selling. So hope you can join us. It'll be in the afternoon. And
2 to 5:30 at the green.
Yes. Okay. At the greenhouse at the Germantown campus of Montgomery College.
Very good. Okay. With that, I think we should move into the next portion of our program. Thanks to all of those who have submitted questions. Our wonderful team of Montgomery County Master Gardeners researched those questions and provided what we hope are helpful answers that you can use to make some progress in your garden. So with that, the first question is provided by Amy Stowe. And the question is, what might be killing the majority of our viburnum? They believe it's an American spice viburnum. There are some pictures available, including one of the healthy bushes, with absolutely no sign of life from any of the established branches. They cut off the dead wood, but looking at the wood, a good part of it appears to be discolored, grayish. There are 4 new shoots from the base, about 5 foot tall and in flower. All the other plants around the viburnum appear to be fine, while our hydrangea looks to have suffered from the cold winter, not going to cut it back until we have warm nights. Thanks again for helping us to try and understand what's going on in our garden. So with that question, Steve, would you like to take the opportunity to answer that?
Sure, thanks. I guess the client mentioned it's an American spice viburnum. Just to clarify, it's probably a Korean spice viburnum. We do have native viburnums, and they're wonderful. And we have a lot of viburnums that are native primarily to Asia. Viburnums as a whole are generally very disease and insect resistant. They get some damage to their leaves, causing some cupping and twisting. That's not what we're seeing here. And that would be caused by aphids usually. The large branch diebacks probably either cankers, and they occasionally get cankers. And cankers are basically what happens in a plant. You have this plumbing system there that water and nutrients move up and food products move down. It gets compromised. It gets clogged, blocked. And it's usually a pathogen like a fungus that will do that. So it's a choke point. So everything above that point will essentially just almost look like it's dying from a lack of water. So kind of has symptoms consistent with that. But there was one of the pictures, it was a little hard to see. It's probably deserves some further investigation. Sometimes we get borers on viburnums. Not very often. Usually they don't, and that's prone to other plants. And the same sort of thing. They'll choke off that area of the plant. That's the larva of the insect tunnels underneath the bark. Eventually, the way we kind of know it's a borer is that you have an exit hole. You'll have a hole. Sometimes they'll kick out some frass. That's their excrement. And it looks like something there. And a favorite place for them to get, and also cankers, is right in the crotches, because they're often kind of a weak spot. And sometimes in the wind, and the plant shakes from the wind or ice or snow, it cracks open a little, and that allows an area for pathogens to enter, or more easier way for the borers to enter. So the female borer is pretty clever. She's going to lay her eggs in areas where she believes it's easier access into the plant. So check those points, crotches, weak points where there's wounds. That's likely areas where you have borers or cankers. So if you have either one of those, what can you do? All you can really do at this point is to prune those sections out and remove them. You've seen some in one of the pictures, some growth being kicked out from down below. It may recover, but it's going to take years to regroup what was lost, because it was a large portion of the plant. But it should grow back more quickly if that's the case this next time, because you'll all store food energy down below, and it's going to move into those few remaining shoots. So it doesn't look good for what's there, but I don't think the plant is out. If you're willing to wait, it'll come back. And viburnums are well known to be tolerant to real heavy pruning. So, they'll likely come back. And hopefully in the next year or so, it'll look pretty decent again.
Great. Awesome. Glad we have the solution. All right. The next question is about a hemlock pest. This question was provided by Pat by calling into the Ballard phone number. And the question is, what is wrong with my hemlock? The leaves are covered in white spots. What pesticide can I use to control it? Mary, would you like to answer this question?
Okay. Your hemlock probably has Hemlock woolly adelgid. And this is a small aphid-like insect that isn't very big. It's a few millimeters long, and it covers itself with this white waxy material, which is what you're seeing. But what why this Hemlock woolly adelgid is bad is because it goes into the, it inserts its mouth parts, has sucking mouth parts, and inserts it into the base of the needles on the new growth and sucks the sap out of the tree. And the needles turn brown, and as the population expands within, it can expand pretty rapidly over the year. And by about 3 or 4 years out, the tree will die. So you need to control the hemlock woolly adelgid, and the hemlock woolly adelgid. But to do that, you need to understand the life cycle. In Maryland, we have 2 generations in a year, and the adelgid overwinters as an adult female on the needles underneath the waxy coat. It'll lay in the March and April, lay its eggs underneath that waxy coat, and then come April and May, the nymphs hatch out and go in and latch into the new growth, the needles of the new growth, and they'll. This generation does not. This generation tends not to have winged members, but but they can be moved. They can be blown in the wind to another tree. They can be moved by birds, animals, human activity, and so it's highly vulnerable. The hemlocks, especially along the mountains and where we had the hemlock forest, are highly vulnerable. So to control it, you need to spray the tree with horticulture, and that means you've got to drench the whole tree. And if you can't reach the top of the tree, you're going to have to get arborists, certified arborists to do it for you, because they'll either use drench the tree, or they'll apply a systemic on the to the base of the tree. But you drench the tree with horticultural oil in February, March, then that's to get that first generation. And then as the nymphs mature, and they'll, in about mid-June, you'll go in and if you're doing it yourself, you do another spray, and you got to reach all parts of the tree and really get all the, make sure you're covering everything, all the needles. And but you have to do it a second time in mid-June, and this is to get the nymphs before they mature into and lay eggs. And but there's a difference in the mid-June in second generation of the second generation. After they laid eggs, and the ones that come out second generation, some of them will fly to other trees. So if you don't want other hemlocks in the area to get infested, you need to control it. And you've got to be pretty aggressive in controlling this pest. It will kill the tree. It's killed. It's been here for about over 50 years. It's killed thousands of trees in eastern and Carolina and in the eastern U.S. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. So it sounds like the really critical factor here is to remember that it's twice a year that you have to treat your hemlock, not just once. Mm-hmm. Okay. The third question today is about holly branches. Boy, these gardens got hit hard this year. The question is submitted by Sheila, and maybe Steve, if you could take this one. What is happening with the holly? There are 5 of them. They always get brown branches, and some have died. Some of them have been replaced.
Yeah, so it looks like a little bit of kind of weakening of the plant over time, and it may not be as I think these are. There's a version of, I think these are Japanese hollies, actually. They kind of look very similar to this cultivar. looks very similar to inkberry. And it has a leaf like an inkberry, a little bit smaller. So the inkberries can handle a little bit more shade, and they're native, but the Japanese hollies really need to be in a very sunny location. If they don't get the right conditions, then they become a little more weaker and more subject to, like I think you mentioned, Maureen, if we have a really harsh winter, you're going to get scattered branches that have been predisposed and they're going to die back. So between the cold and the shade, I think you'll see a little bit of declining branches here and there. So the plant's trying to adjust to the environment that it has. So when you first bought this plant, perhaps it would have been very full, very dense all the way through. You can just like layers and layers of leaves. But as it goes into a more shaded area, the leaves are fewer, they're larger, they're thinner. And then at times, there's just not enough energy to support everything, and they get a little weaker. So you get some branch dieback. And I think that's what's happening here. So you could improve the cultural conditions by allowing more light, something like that. And if there's periods of drought, water. But I think it's just being weakened out by the good cultural conditions. And so you get a secondary fungus coming in there attacking it. And that's, it's really an opportunistic fungus. But the real issue is more the cultural conditions than that of, say a pathogen. So there's really no need to, spray any fungicides. Really more on the cultural side we should focus on to help them.
It sounds like they need to dig a few up and move them to another part of their garden and test that.
Yes.
Light, maybe too much water, maybe not, maybe too dry, who knows? But it sounds like something larger than that's affecting all of them. They've been swapping them out and putting them in, and they're showing the same signs of stress.
Yes.
Steve, there's a second question here about holly from a Debbie R. What are causing the dead leaves in my holly bush? 6 of these hollies have scattered branches with dead leaves. So I know this is a similar question.
Yeah, this is very similar. So this is something sometimes you see on inkberries, hollies. If they get stressed, now this is an evergreen, of course, and since it's turned brown, but there's a lag time. So when the event or period, whatever caused the injury or the stress to the plant, and the time you see the brown, it's a considerable lag. So this probably occurred something from last year, even though you've seen the browning and purpling up. And that's going to happen in around our garden as we get these temperatures in the 80s and 90s. The system that's present to conduct the water and minerals can't keep pace. So you're going to see some of these shoots start to flag and cave in. And so you're going to see more of that, basically the same sort of thing, pruning it out. It may be sort of an event. That's what I'm hoping, that it was a period, maybe last year. I don't think it was really too bad, but there were periods of time when it's maybe fairly dry or maybe fairly wet. But inkberries do handle soils on the wetter side. That's a big plus for them. So it's more or less the same thing again. Yes.
Okay. All right. Moving on to another evergreen. Looks like these people were all chatting amongst themselves and decided to submit their questions at the same time. We have a question about a Deodora cedar. And Mary, I'm going to toss this one to you. BB McMeekin submitted this on the Ballard phone line. What is making holes in my Deodora cedar? Could it be a sapsucker?
Yes, it could be a sapsucker. And the holes, what sapsuckers do is the picture shows a typical sapsucker damage where you have a whole series of holes in a row, or either vertically or horizontally. And the yellow-bellied sapsucker particularly likes Deodora cedar, as well as maple, birch, and Bradford pear. And very often they'll set up a tree and they'll come back and feed on the tree. They'll keep enlarging these holes and over time and from year to year. And so it'll get more and more extensive feeding damage. But these, they aren't the only things that are using these holes. They're feeding on the sap from the tree and also any small insects that get in there. But they also, there are other woodpeckers that do it too, such as downy, redheaded, hairy, and the flickers. And they will come to these same nurse trees and feed on the sap. As the other group that will do it is like tree squirrels and porcupines.
Wow.
Yeah, to control them. I mean, they come back to the same tree year after year. Well, to control them, it's mainly try to protect them. You can either offer an alternate food source such as suet, or you can provide or cover the affected area or affected trunk with 4th-inch hardware cloth or burlap or mesh netting. But there's a downside to doing that, because once they set up a tree in an area, they'll come back for years to come. And if they lose one source of food, they'll move on to another tree. So you end up with 2 trees damaged. So you may want to just let them feed on that one, so they aren't feeding on any of the other trees in your yard.
Got it. Wow. Okay. Now moving on to Big Leaf Hydrangea. This is a question submitted by Linda Pretoria through the Ballard line. Steve, I'll toss this one to you. It's about black spot on Big Leaf Hydrangea, how to deal with it. And it says, my established hydrangeas always get black spot and the leaves and flowers die. What can I do to prevent that?
Well, okay, I can talk to you a little bit about the leaf spot. The Big Leaf Hydrangea gets leaf spot at times, but there's a couple kinds of leaf spot it'll get. It'll get a fungal leaf spot, Cercospora, or it can get a bacterial leaf spot at times. It's Xanthomonas, and sometimes it's a little hard to tell the two apart. But the approach to manage them is similar. And we start off with doing cultural, trying to increase the air circulation. Don't overhead irrigate. If you have badly blighted shoots or leaves, you may want to pick or remove those off. If you have a number of rhododendrons and number of hydrangeas, and one of them is really badly infected each year, then be honest, maybe want to remove that one. Maybe it's just not conducive to our area. There are chemical approaches. There are fungicides you can use. This is a foliar event here. So it's a little bit easier to control. And there are some pesticide approaches that you can use that are relatively benign or organic or OMRI type things you could do. But it will involve multiple applications there, and you have to do it periodically because the fungicide will wash off. And if it is caused by a bacteria, some of those fungicides won't work. But some things that give horticultural oil actually helps out. Some other things that too. There's a Bordeaux mixes in Daconil. There's a number of different fungicides you could use if you wanted to go that route. If it is bacterial, then you probably want to have something that has some copper in it and have some effect on that. So that goes to Bordeaux, which is basically lime and copper sulfate. It's been used for many, many years. It's considered organic. You could use something like that. But really, going back, I think most of the time, it is, I think, managing it culturally. If it is really bad, plant that tends to get it a lot, maybe removing those ones that are badly affected and hitting it on that end and then some years, I got to point out, some years it's just worse than others because conditions for the leaf spot are good that year. So that'll vary too. So hopefully it won't be as bad this year. The other thing too I need to point out is that you see more leaf spots on plant materials that are weakened. Their cell integrity is not as strong. And so hopefully keeping healthy, vigorous plants, increasing the amount of light, improving the air circulation, removing blighted shoots and leaves. You don't have to go to that step of using a fungicide. Try to avoid doing that. But sometimes you may have to go there, just kind of regain the momentum, get the plant back into good health. But if it's something I usually don't do it, other than maybe an event once or twice. That's it. I try not to do it periodically.
Hey, well, thanks, Steve. So it sounds like if people work on the light first, making sure they're getting plenty of water, then maybe they won't have as big a problem with the black spot. Now we're on to a very a fun question, really, although it's a real hazard. Jumping worm. Mary, I'm going to ask you about this. I've heard they are also known as crazy worms, snake worms, Jersey wigglers, Alabama jumpers. Can you tell us more about jumping worms and how to get rid of them?
Okay, jumping worms are small, fairly small worms that thrash around wildly and move in kind of a snake-like manner. And as you can see from the picture, they're grayish brown, and they all have a typical white band around their what's called the clitoris. The jumping worms are actually invasive. They originated in China and Thailand. So they're from Asia. There's 3 different species that we have, and they have a annual life cycle. They the adults die at the first hard frost, and the next generation survives winter in cocoons down in the ground. They develop into full-size adults. They emerge when the temperatures on the ground get above 50 degrees, and that varies from year to year. But I think we're above 50 now. So they develop into full-size adults in about 60 days, and then they generally they're supposed to have 1 generation per year, but they may have 2 if it's really warm. This one of the things that where you can recognize jumping worms is they live in the top 2 layers, the top layer of the soil and the leaf layer, and they have these dark coffee-like brown castings, which are their feces. And if you see that feces, you know you've got jumping worms. Well, they're a problem because they consume a large amount of organic material and change the surface of the soil. But they also affect water filtration because they're not digging down into the substrate and providing channels for the water to move through, the nutrients to go down, and they're making it less favorable for other microorganisms that are in the soil. Now, how do you prevent jumping worms? Well, first off, if you're in a nursery, you look for the brown in the pots. You look for these brown castings. It really looks like coffee grounds. If you got that, you don't want to go near that plant. If you can get it, have them come home like in the soil, or if you're getting bulk soil, bulk mulch, or the bags of mulch, it could come in on that. They could come in on plants from plant exchanges. So you want to be aware of the problem. And if you want to test for jumping worms, what you can do is pick a foot square area of ground, and then pour mixture of mustard seed from Asian or Indian mustard. It's you use 1/3 cup of that, and then fill it up to a gallon of water, and pour half of it on the area, and then wait a few minutes and then pour the rest. And this will cause all the earthworms to come up, and you can pick out the jumping worms. The jumping worms are controlled by you can first off you can go through the ground and just pick them out, or through the soil, like you got soil in a bag and you spread it out on the ground. You can pick them out, and then you want to put them in a plastic bag, preferably black, leave it in the sun, and then dispose of it in your trash, not in your compost, because they could keep surviving. Another way is to spread the bulk mulch or compost or whatever you have out on the driveway and let it sit there and pick out the worms. Or you could use solarization, where you take a piece of painter's plastic, spread it out on the ground, 15-foot one, and cake the top layer and the mulch layer and lay it down on, put it on the plastic, and then cover it over with the other part of the plastic. So it's like all close, and leave it there for 3 or 4 days, so the sun will kill them. But you got to leave them there for 3 or 4 days for it will kill the worms. And if you have eggs in there, by perchance you want to, or the cocoons, you want to leave it probably a little bit longer.
Got it. Okay, Mary, thank you. Next question was submitted by Sean. And Steve, I'm going to toss this one to you. It's about scales. What is this scale on my swamp oak? How do I control it? What are the common types of scales found in the mid-Atlantic, and how to treat them?
Okay, yeah, oaks, our native oaks get a number of type of scales. So scales are insects that feed onto oak trees, generally on the twigs and branches, sometimes on the trunks. Usually the trunk has a thicker bark at that point, and it makes it a little more difficult for the scale to feed. So what the scales are doing is essentially kind of like little barnacles. They're coming up to the plant. It's getting its mouth parts, the really long mouth parts. It has to get down in underneath the epidermis or the thin bark, the young stems, to tissue called the phloem tissue, and it's sucking out the sugars that have been made in there. So the scales that get on oaks are kind of clever in that they're very well camouflaged. So there's one called, and one we're looking at this time, is called oak lecanium scale. And there's other scales out there. There's ones that get onto oaks and maples. There's gloomy scale, obscure scale, and things like that. And sometimes they're really difficult to see. And some of those scales are what's called armored scales. They feed, but they don't excrete this material called honeydew. And that is a sugary kind of excrement that comes out, and then a fungus feeds on that, and it turns black. But an oak lecanium scale is kind of in a different group. Its group is called of like soft scale, and then they will excrete like a honeydew-like product out, and you can see the evidence of their feeding when down below or on the trunk of the tree, you'll see it black in places like that. So the oak lecanium generally has one generation a year, and what they do is they time their emergence from the eggs, which are kept under the female, kind of like like a barnacle or like a tortoiseshell. She lays her eggs are underneath there, and they're protected. So one of the times to get them, the best times to get scaled in general, is when the young come out. They're called crawlers, and they pretty much most scale do this. They might have 2 generations or 3 generations, or maybe they just have 1 generation. But that first generation is timed when the leaves emerge. So when the leaves emerge, that is probably the best time if you need to treat them. And you can treat them with a wide variety of insecticides. Some that are a little more, kind of benign or environmentally friendly, like the soaps, the oils, the neem oil, things like that. But you got to get good coverage, and you got to get them when these crawlers are out. So if the timing's right and the coverage is good, you can have really good success in controlling them. But scales on oaks, they're pretty common. And the other thing is, just if you have a few scales on there, may not warrant control measures, because we do have beneficials and predators come out that will probably in most cases, keep these in check, the scale in check. Sometimes in urban areas in particular, there's not a lot of beneficials and predators there. In other situations, they may get out of hand, but generally our beneficials will probably keep things in check, probably limiting the use of pesticides, or maybe just a portion of the tree where you see the infestation bad. Maybe you don't have to do the entire tree. The timing is real important with it.
Sounds like it. So on the checklist for spring, people need to look for scales. All right. The next question is about Japanese camellia. Steve, I'm going to toss this one to you. It was submitted by Mary Lou. I have 4 Japanese camellias in my yard, all 4 of which have the sooty mold and white fly damage from last year. I pruned them by about a third, and I also treated them with safer insecticidal soap and neem oil. They have all bloomed this year and have some new growth. they still have some sooty mold present, speckled leaves, and quite a number of yellow leaves. Should I treat again for the sooty mold? What should be done about the yellow leaves?
Wow. So this is a really interesting situation here. Probably really needs to talk to the client and flush things out a little bit more. But it sounds like they had some issues with, we do have some whiteflies that do overwinter here in Maryland, some different species than the ones, if you're familiar with whiteflies. Some folks or gardeners who have greenhouses, or maybe the case they have tomato plants. We have some things, sweet potato whitefly and greenhouse whitefly. They normally don't overwinter, but we do have some. The big thing it gets on camellia is a cottony camellia scale. And was talked about, there's a group of soft scale. So this is a soft scale, and it secretes a honeydew. And then a fungus feeds on that. And that's the sooty mold, and it turns the leaves black. Now that sooty mold even if the scale all died tomorrow, it's going to take weeks, maybe months, even longer for that sooty mold to kind of wash away, wear off. So some of that might still be old sooty mold. It's hard to get all the scale and the whitefly. So there still could be some feeding on it. But I'm a little worried when I saw this is that some of that kind of silver flecking on the top of the leaves, that looks like something maybe like spider mites or thrips, and we'd have to get in there and look more closely on that. So sometimes what happens when we control one pest, we actually open the door for another pest to come in. And maybe that's what's happening here with the flecking on the leaves. The yellow spots on the leaves, that could be, I couldn't quite make it out. Afterwards, it could be a virus. I have one that has a virus somewhat similar to that, from best I can tell. Or there is an algae leaf spot. There's an algae that lives on there, and it's problematic to camellia leaves. I haven't seen that too much in our area, but it kind of looks like that. We'd have to get a closer look at it. But if your plant has a virus, it'll always have a virus. But most viruses that attack plants, the good news is they're relatively benign, but some are very problematic in that they cause real decline in the plants and unusual patterns on the leaves or the flowers. What we need to do is look at the undersides of the leaves and to see for any crawlers of the cottony camellia scale. And right now, they're clever. They're almost clear. They almost look clear. You can almost like see through them, and they'll be on the undersides of the leaves. So that's our clue. And that they're there, and if they are there, then we probably want to do some type of management for them.
Horticultural oil, the
neem, the soap. Sometimes kind of, some people have they have a favorite for a variety of reasons, and some people like the neem, some people like the soaps, and some people like the oils. And so, if that's the case, then you probably may want to go after that. But hopefully, it's not a virus. These spots on the leaves, that probably we need to talk to them, Mary, and get a sample, and we can take a closer look and make a better, more accurate diagnosis.
Sounds good. So it sounds like what you're suggesting overall is that they did treat it last year, but maybe they need to treat it again to really take care of that problem.
Yeah, and what I forgot to mention, that silver flecking on there. Sometimes when we use pesticides in the past, I'm not maybe in this case, but sometimes when we use one like what Mary was talking about earlier on, controlling the cottony camellia, Hemlock woolly adelgids. Sometimes when some of the products we use to do that, particularly some of these systemics, sometimes it actually bolstered populations of mites to occur. It controlled the Hemlock woolly adelgid, but kind of let the spider mite population. So I'm not sure that silver flecking on camellias is not something I'm used to seeing. It looks like something like mites or thrips.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah. Very, very helpful. Mary, I'm going to pass this one to you. We're down to our last few questions. And folks, if you have questions, please be sure to put them in the comment section, because we're approaching that moment where we're going to be looking at your questions. So this next question, Mary, is about herbicide, using it to control weeds. It's submitted by Tim. He says, "Help, my garden has been inadequate. What is it? What is this weed, and what must I do? What must I apply to it?" So we must have a photo.
Yes. Tim, your weed is dead nettle. This is a winter annual that germinates. It becomes noticeable in the spring, but it have light purple flowers, and you'll notice the leaves are triangular in shape, and they're kind of crowded toward the top of the stem. The stems of the dead nettle is a mint, so it has square stems, and the leaves are opposite, and they're often purple colored toward the top. Dead nettle produces seed in the spring after the flowering, and the seed germinates in the fall or early spring. But the good news about this weed, unlike one that's very often mistaken with it for creeping ivy, is this weed has fibrous roots, so you can just pull it up. So that's the recommended control. Is just pull it out because it'll come right out. But you want to get to it soon before the seeds disperse.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Mary. The next question that we have, Steve, is about an azalea, and it's submitted by Leah. She's asking, why is the azalea foliage looking different on this side of the shrub?
Wow, that's a really interesting picture, and it's kind of brings a lot of questions to kind of ask to try to. And when you look at it, it appears that it may be one section of a plant, or it looks like there's several azaleas clustered in there, and it looks to me like one of the azaleas separate. I could be wrong on this. Is taking on this symptom, and it's kind of interesting. It looks like it's chlorotic, and so that's not enough chlorophyll there. What's causing that? Well, it may be a lack of micronutrients, and usually we address that by lowering the pH. But the other plants would normally be affected if it's overall that area, and they're established plants. So this is a plant that's been there for a while. It's only working on this one plant, and it's shown this yellowing, this chlorosis. So it could be some type of a root problem. And sometimes if you get a root rot, or initially in a root rot, and sometimes you might see this on pansies and petunias, it doesn't kill the plant, but it weakens the root system that it can't pick up the nutrients properly. And so you start seeing this chlorosis. I think that's what might be going on here. So it seems to be unique to that one plant. Often, if that's the case, you can try to supplement it without putting some fertilizer that has more iron in it, or an iron, what they call chelated iron. It's a powder, it's soluble, poured over the plant. That may help, but usually if you see something like that, sometimes that look is from lace bugs. I don't think it is in this case, from the best I can tell from the picture. So it's an interesting site problem, root problem. I'm thinking you could get a soil test done, but I think if you get one right around that median area nearby, I don't think you're going to see it terribly different. I think something's damaged the roots somehow. So that's kind of where I'm with that. Okay.
Well, thank you, Steve. The next question, and it's our final question of the day, is about boxwood. And Mary, I'd like to ask you if you could possibly answer this question for Aaron. Aaron submitted this question. What is wrong with my boxwood? It is covered with white fluffy spots. How do I get rid of it?
Okay, Aaron, the boxwood spots, these white spots, are boxwood psyllids, which is a common pest of boxwood. It's an incidental one. It'll show up some years, and other years it doesn't. But what you're seeing is the nymphs covered by a white waxy substance, similar to like what the Hemlock woolly adelgid was covered with. And it is another sucking insect, and it's doing similar to what the Hemlock woolly adelgid did. It's the nymphs are clustered around the base of the stem, are sucking the sap out of the plant. The nymphs are or the adults are light green. They're only about 3 millimeters long. And the way you control them is you could spray them with insecticidal soap, and but you would have to and use that to do it. But this species overwinters as eggs in the leaf buds of the boxwood, and they're or box scales, and they emerge in early summer or early spring. And when the eggs, and they open in early spring, and the eggs hatch, and then the nymphs feed. It takes them about 60 days to mature into adults in early June. And after that, the females deposit the eggs and that overwinter on the host plant. So if you really wanted to treat it, and the other thing is damage. You can tell the damage because the leaves become cupped, but you also see the white waxy substance that's covering the nymphs. The reason you use insecticidal soap is because the insecticidal soap is able to get through the waxy layer and to the nymph or the psyllid. Okay, and that eventually, the leaves are cupped, and you may have a bunch of psyllids in one cupping cluster of the leaves. So the tips of the branches will become cupped.
Mary, thank you very much for that. And if folks have any other questions, I'm going to give you one last chance. Please submit them through the comment section on our Facebook link. If you would like to submit them for a future program, please send them as an email to inthegardenwithmcmg@gmail.com, or you may call 301-590-2842 and leave a voicemail with your email address. And we look forward to using your questions to help all the gardeners in Montgomery County in some future program. Please remember to enter as much detail as possible if you email, and to add a photo. Photo is very important, as you can see from our program today, and that's what's used to research the issue affecting the plants and come up with the diagnosis. The next session of In the Garden is scheduled for Tuesday, May 17th. We hope you will mark your calendars and join us. Share this with friends. If you have a question you would like to submit for discussion for that program, the deadline for inclusion in the next session is Tuesday, May 10th at 6 p.m. And remember to include your email so that we may follow up and ask you some questions in advance. We make every effort to answer your questions on air, but if we run out of time, we will provide you an answer by email. And at this point, I'd like to check with Bev to see if we have any questions submitted on our Facebook comment.
No questions on the Facebook page.
Thank you, Bev. And thank you, Steve and Mary, for taking the time today to answer these questions, for being our in-house experts. And we'd like to thank all the researchers behind the scenes, Mohar, Lila, Sheila, Deborah, Debbie, Nancy, Howard, and Mary, who took the time to research the questions and review the photos in prep for today's program. And Bev behind the scenes. Again, the next program will be Tuesday, May 17th. Thank you all for joining us.